Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Golden. I am the energy analyst here at GreenBiz, and today we are here to discuss the session, Is there a role for waste to energy in the circular economy? So just to start out about garbage incineration. So garbage incineration is truly a dirty solution to a dirty problem. It's just simply put, it's kind of the practice of burning garbage to create energy. And it's actually a lot more common than I thought it was. When I started to do research for this session, I found out that we actually burn about 13% of the solid waste in the US. And there's 72 major incinerators that are across the country. And it, in some ways, like on its face, sounds like it might be a good idea. We're getting more value out of solid waste. We're taking the solid waste and we are turning it into a new usable product. And in fact, 23 states in the US count garbage incineration as part of their, like as a renewable energy resource, which to me just seems ridiculous. I don't know what's renewable about burning garbage. But in reality, it's deeply problematic. It is relying on something that we want less of as an energy source. So it creates these misaligned incentives. It's also a really inefficient form of energy. And it's also incredibly polluting. It has a terrible legacy of environmental racism. These incinerators have traditionally been located close to low-income communities and communities of color, as much of our dirty infrastructure has been. And so this really isn't a conversation about how bad incineration is. My panelist, Will, and my panelist, Dante, who I'm hoping in a moment, both of us are, all three of us agree that this is something that we really need to address, that we need to be getting rid of garbage incineration. Really what today's conversation about is, where do we go from here? What do we do with the solid waste that we have? I think that the first thing is that we need to be diverting more materials. And we've been talking about this throughout this conference. They were speaking about this in the keynotes. How can we be transforming these materials, instead of going to landfills, to be going to recycling and be going to compost? And we also need to redesign our materials so that they have more value, which is another thing that we're talking about all over this conference. And in this session, the question I'm asking is, what are we going to do with the rest? And there's really two schools of thoughts in the directions that we can be going in. One is the idea of, should we be innovating on the technologies that we have so that our habits are less harmful? Or do we use that money and that resources to be prioritizing changing behaviors? Or is it somewhere in between? So I'm going to turn it over to one of our panelists, Will, who is the Director of Cleantech and Strategy and Investments at Cox Enterprises. So please, Will, introduce yourself and what you do.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, this is an important issue. So hey, everyone, I'm Will Thorburn. I work at Cox Enterprises, as Sarah mentioned. I'm a member of our Cleantech team. The idea behind what we're doing in Cleantech is essentially diversifying our organization, creating revenue growth and economic growth in an area that we feel very passionate about. That area is what we call clean tech or sustainability. When we say clean tech, what we really mean is resource efficiency or adaptability or resiliency. Yeah, I see a question, is clean tech. I think it's an amorphous term. For me, it's really those three things I just mentioned, though. And you know, I think you know, we have a belief that we can find clean tech opportunities in 4 sectors, and there's probably more than that, but we focus on 4: energy, waste, food and agriculture, and water. I cover energy and waste. I have a colleague that covers food and ag and water. And we're, you know, investing and acquiring businesses with the intent of making money and doing right by the environment. Sarah, I'll pause there. I could go on, but I don't want to consume too much time with an intro.
Yeah, thanks so much, Will. And we do, as I mentioned, we have Dante joining, and I think we're just having a little bit of trouble getting him in the room. So while we're waiting for Dante to be able to pop in, Will, can you share a little bit about the technologies that Cox Enterprises is investing in right now to be addressing this challenge of waste to energy?
Yeah. I mean, this is a tricky one, right? Because I think you hit the nail on the head. When people say waste to energy, I think most of our minds go to incineration. And I think folks who are well informed on the topic lump incineration in kind of that place. And we certainly do too. However, I think we need to find solutions for hard to recycle waste streams. Like there are waste streams out there that are just very hard to divert from the landfill. We're at 68% diversion at Cox Enterprises, which is absolutely best in class for a company our size. I don't know our exact employee count. I bet somebody out there on the line does, but I'll take a stab at it and say it's 50,000 people. We're a $19 billion organization, and to divert 2/3 of our waste from the landfill is exceptional. But what we've learned in doing that is that there are waste streams that we just can't divert, even though we work with our supply chain partners. Even though we work with our industry partners, there are tough waste streams. And so what we've done is start to invest in two particular areas, pyrolysis and gasification. And we're doing that with the intention of helping to develop technologies and ecosystems for the management of these tough to deal with waste streams, in the hope that we can find solutions which are environmentally friendly, that don't have a bad emissions profile, that don't have sort of a toxic leaching substance that still has to go to the landfill. And I think really importantly, that have an output or a product which can be used in a circular manner. Like, I think it's great if we take plastics and we convert them to fuels, which are then burned in engines. I think that's better than extracting new fuel. But I think it's better if we take plastics and we can keep them in the economy and put them back into plastic manufacturing through some sort of a chemical process. And that's the type of work that we're trying to do. And I should mention the companies. So specifically Nexus Fuels, if you want to Google it, and Sierra Energy. Those are two that we're invested in.
Yeah, and I think that that's a very seductive idea. Like, how can we be taking these waste products, especially with the idea of being able to divert plastics and then do that chemical recycling that you're talking about and avoid the need for more chemicals. And so one thing that comes up to me, well, two things. First of all, is how promising these technologies are, because I understand that we have spent 30 years playing with gasification technologies and these pyrolysis technologies. I saw one figure that said that so far we've invested about $3 billion in trying to find better ways to do garbage incineration. And to date, all of the technologies that we've invested in have fallen short of the output and have overshot the pollution targets, so that there's this desire to be able to be polluting less as we convert these things. But so far we haven't found a technology that really scales. So can you tell us why now is a moment where that might be different, and how you are thinking about the potential shortcomings of these technologies?
Sure. I mean, this is a space that's not for the faint of heart, right? And I want to make a quick distinction too. Pyrolysis and gasification are not incineration, nor are they incineration adjacent. One is exothermic, one is endothermic. They're fundamentally different processes. We don't like incineration, nor do we want to be a part of it. So I don't know if the $3 billion was actually incineration investment or encapsulating other technologies that I would classify differently. The question around scalability, why is now the time? I mean, I think the issues that we're trying to solve have been around for 30 years, right? And it's not an easy nut to crack on how to scale this type of business. Let's take plastics, for example. The logistics of the chain of feedstock are incredibly complex. There's no robust, clear market for pricing and grading waste plastics. The product is very heterogeneous, which creates an issue for a process like pyrolysis, which really thrives on a pretty consistent feedstock stream. And then on the output side, I think, typically you're competing with some sort of a commodity product, right? So you have pricing pressure. So there've been business model issues with scaling these things in the past. And a lot of the technologies that we've seen make a lot of market noise have been incredibly capital intensive. So essentially what you've seen is businesses that make some noise in the marketplace, raise a lot of money, build a big plant without the ability to really run it like you should a manufacturing facility. And that's created challenges. So what we've focused on is modularity of the technology. We've focused on evaluating and understanding feedstock logistics and also on creating novel end products with the hope that we can drive some sort of a price premium around sustainability or circularity. And I'll brag on Nexus Fuels for a moment. We're operating a facility out of Atlanta today. It is a commercial scale module capable of processing in the neighborhood of 50 tons of plastic per day, 100,000 gallons of pyrolysis oil out of that plant. And we are currently selling it to Shell Chemical to be used in plastics manufacturing out of their Norco, Louisiana chemical plant. And so I think that's a great example of circularity with plastics that would have otherwise wound up, in the landfill or even in our waterways, right?
Yeah. So I want to, first of all, completely recognize gasification is not the same thing as incineration, and did not mean to conflate the two at all. And I think one thing that, channeling Dante a little bit, since he's still having some computer issues and getting in, is understanding, in the past, gasification technologies that we've invested in have fallen short of the pollution targets that we want to see. And I understand Sierra Energy says that they don't have any outputs, any noxious chemicals as an output. However, in the past, we've heard similar sort of desires around silver bullet technologies. So on that point, how can we be sure that we are actually headed towards something that's truly addressing the pollution problem?
Yeah, I mean, you can't. I think we should all have a healthy amount of skepticism. I think I would expect everyone to feel that way until we're able to successfully scale one of these businesses, right? Because you're absolutely correct. We've seen big promises in the past, and we've seen companies fall short of them. It's one of the reasons actually that I think both Nexus and Sierra have done a really good job of not over advertising capabilities, not going out and seeking massive multi-$100 million capital raises before the technology is ready, as I would say, for prime time. And all that without sharing anything particularly proprietary with regards to Sierra, what I can tell you is that at the scale we're operating at today, we've done extensive testing around our emissions and the products that come out of the gasifier, which are essentially syngas composed of carbon monoxide and dioxide and hydrogen. And then a non-leaching, this is a terribly confusing product name, a non-leaching vitrified slag. Think of that as like, glass and metal that falls to the bottom of the gasifier. We've tested all of these products extensively. We've got air emissions permits from Monterey County in California, which I think is frankly a bragging right, because we all know California is a leader in environmental health and safety. And we believe that the non-syngas components are perfectly acceptable to be used in, say, like construction materials. And so, again, I would expect that everybody should say, okay, I'll believe it when I see it, but I'm actually quite confident that we're going to be able to come through.
So another that comes up is you just talked about a tremendous amount of invested. And of course, this is you are coming as a clean tech investor. So in the example, let's say, of Nexus Fuels, where you're relying on this single-use plastic as a fuel source, how is that disincentivizing going to net zero goals when you're creating a technology that is dependent on continuing to create waste? Is there a tension there?
Yeah, there is actually. I think this is such a good point, and I also, I'm not to be cheeky, but let's call the plastic feedstock instead of fuel, right? Because we're not burning it, so we're feeding a chemical process versus sort of fueling something. Yeah, the tension I think you highlight is, I mean, this is a really healthy debate. And I'll share my perspective. I think my view, the view of Nexus and a lot of others in the space, is that single-use plastics are a problem, right? And what I don't want to do is create a situation where we reduce our incentives to eliminate non-critical single-use plastics. I think that's a worthy fight, and it's something we should all be working on. And I'm proud of the work that folks like the New Materials Institute at the University of Georgia are doing to do just that. And we engage with them and are supportive of them and others. However, I think it would be naive to think that, or to believe that we could eliminate all single-use plastics from our economy, even over the medium term. Applications in healthcare, which I think we're seeing it with COVID right now, right? Like the absolutely critical nature of single-use plastics in the healthcare arena are something that keep us healthier and protect our lives. That's important stuff. I'd love it if we could engineer it out of the supply chain. That's not a short-term goal. In food and food safety, films, for instance, are very important to the way that our economy works. They're important to human health and safety, and getting fresh food from point A to point B. And so I think there are arenas in the economy where we're just going to be faced with living with these things. And what we're doing at Cox is saying, hey, let's be supportive of efforts to clean up our supply chain and the materials we use, but let's also be creative about finding solutions to deal with the stuff that we're going to be stuck with for some long period of time. And I think that's where Nexus and where Sierra come into play.
Yeah, I certainly have a feeling that at the point that we have this waste, this feedstock, so to speak, to be going into these machines, that something has already gone wrong. And so as an investor in this, and as a company that wants to see returns on those investments, then is that putting you in a position where you're less likely to be supporting or be moving in an incredibly bullish and fast way towards zero waste?
No, I mean, I think this is actually this is a core component of our efforts around zero waste. And I'll give you an example of that. We own a business called Mann Auto Auctions. We produce 80,000 waste tires a year. It's the largest auto auctions business in North America, maybe the world. Somebody from Cox is listening and is embarrassed that I don't know that. And those tires, there's not a good solution for those other than landfilling them, right? Like, what do you do with waste tires? And we said, you know what, this isn't good enough, that that we can't divert this waste stream. And we went out and we found a pyrolysis technology based in Italy. We licensed that technology, brought it to Georgia. We built a demonstration plant in South Georgia, and we are shredding and trying to develop this technology to process our waste tires. And so, you know, in that sense, this is a core part of our diversion efforts. And if we're successful, we'll divert that large chunk of our previously unaddressable waste stream.
So also wanting to channel Dante a little bit here of this idea that came up when we were on our prep call, which is that we have a limited amount of resources, a limited amount of energy, money to be addressing these challenges and trying to get to zero waste. And one thing that Dante was really advocating is the idea that at the point when organizations like Cox and Breakthrough Ventures, the Bill Gates organization that's also a financial supporter of Sierra Energy, then that's money and resources that aren't going towards finding a new systems to truly divert, to get to these 80% diversion goals in municipalities that we know are possible, and to be forming the partnerships needed in order to really be accelerating zero waste goals. So could you address a little bit about the role that you see of these community coalitions being created to stop the feed that would be going towards waste to energy facilities versus the investment in new technologies that make it less harmful?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that work is critically important, but this is not an either or for me. It's a both and I think both sides of the coin are important. And for instance, at Sierra, what we're processing is unsorted municipal solid waste. I mean, essentially what we're trying to do is eliminate landfilling practices, right? Like, we're going to have waste. And to the extent that we can do something other than bury it in a hole in the ground, I think that's a worthy effort, because when we put it in the ground, what happens is the carbon breaks down over 20 years and releases methane, which is very, very bad for the environment, right? And we have all the resulting wastewater issues and things of that nature. So that's one piece of it. And then the other piece is that with, feedstocks like plastics, again, I think, we at Cox would be thrilled to see a dramatic reduction in single-use plastics throughout our economy, and plastics in general throughout our economy. But what I think is unlikely to occur in the near or medium term is elimination of plastics that are non-recyclable by mechanical means. And so we are also committed to finding ways to manage those waste streams such that they don't wind up in our waterways or in our landfills.
Well, yeah, thank you for that perspective. And I would also encourage everybody to take a look at this robust conversation that's happening in chat right now. I want to give a special shout out to Mike Ewall, who is incredibly brilliant on these issues, from environmental justice. Sorry, Mike, but the same organization that Dante is part of, and has been very helpful in all these things, and is linked to a couple of reports of looking at historically what the difference has been between incineration and gasification. Energy Justice Network, I have now looked it up. We just have a couple of minutes left, but I wanted to ask one question from that popped up in this chat, and that's the difference in between these waste streams that are here in the US versus when we're talking about developing places or other. What is the potential for waste energy, or some of the considerations that you think about when we're talking about solving the issue of burning garbage in other places?
Yeah, I mean, I think modularity is the thing, right? This is just a really multifaceted issue, right? Like, the way that we manage waste across the world is I think pretty ineffective, given the population we have and the population growth that we're going to see, and just the amount of stuff that people consume. We need better supply chain logistics, and what I mean by that is we have to be working in our communities to pre-sort items before they wind up all mixed together, because we all know that that's an issue. And I've looked at investing in sorting technology. That's another very, very tough space. I think it's another critically important piece of the puzzle, to the extent that we can get it right. So I think community outreach, encouraging people to recycle the right way, is very important. It always frustrates me when the plate of spaghetti winds up in the recycling bin. and then we've contaminated the whole thing, right? And I mean, and then modularizing technologies that we can deploy at small scale across the world in an economic way. I think that's another very important piece of the puzzle. I tend, and I think our perspective at Cox tends to lean towards not so much the enormous 3,000 ton per day, idea of some sort of waste management infrastructure like is typically seen in incineration, but rather technologies that are capable of functioning at much smaller scale and can be deployed much less expensively.
Well, Will, I want to thank you so much for joining me in this conversation. And I'm sorry that Dante wasn't able to join. I do encourage everybody to take a look at Energy Justice Network. You're all going to have to take my word for it that the prep call for this was fiery and it was great. But I do encourage everybody to take a look at this.
I will back that up. Dante is extremely intelligent on his topic. He knows his stuff. And I really enjoyed talking to him. I'm so sorry that he couldn't make it.
Yes, and Mike has been a great surrogate in the chat. So please check out those resources. This is an important issue and a really complicated issue. And people are really feel passionate on different sides about this. And I think having these conversations about trying to find the nuance is important for how to move forward and deal with the hopefully dwindling waste stream that we have. I encourage everybody to take the survey, which is pinned to the top of the text box, and to enjoy the rest of Circularity and the rest of the sessions. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.